Grow Great is a city government leadership podcast with Lisa Norris and me, Randy Cantrell. Each week we share insights, experiences, and wisdom to help you and your leadership grow great. Our website is growgreat.com. Michael Jordan's quoted as saying, "My best skill was that I was coachable. I was a sponge and aggressive to learn." So as we approach this, Lisa, I don't know, as they say, there's a lot to unpack here. What prompted me, I sent this to Lisa. She and I are constantly kind of batting ideas back and forth. And if you haven't figured this out by now, most of the things that we talk about are things that are in the moment, things that we're in, and things that are top of mind for us. For one, that keeps them real world. And for two, it's something that we're pretty enthusiastic or passionate about. And so hopefully that comes across to everybody that listens and watches our show. And thank you, by the way. We appreciate it. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. We've never hawked that. Mm-hmm. And as a result, our YouTube subscriptions, I don't know, we look like Wayne and Garth down in the basement, doing public TV.
We're a little bit better looking than Wayne and Garth, but we're close.
Listen, our audience, we know this. We know that you guys are just so busy, and audio is so portable. So yeah. I get it. But back to the Jordan skill. My best skill was that I was coachable. I was a sponge and aggressive to learn. High performers, in my experience, Lisa, I've never seen an exception to that. Every high performer, and it's interesting to me that the people who are mediocre or even below mediocre performers lack both of those. They don't seem aggressive to learn. They certainly aren't coachable, and it's just interesting to me. I don't know. I mean, you would think that the person who knows they're a high performer, they got evidence that they're a high performer, and it's like, I'm good. I don't need to. I just have not found that to be the case. I have found that those are the people who are constantly making inquiry. What do you see? What do you see that I can improve? So my son and I had a conversation about some public speaking, and he does a fair amount of it. I've always done a fair amount of it at work, church, in front of groups. And I was giving him some constructive criticism. And right out of the gate, when I started, I said, I've got an observation. It's not really a criticism. It's more of a tweak. And he said, yeah, tell me. He said, I mean, who else is going to tell me? Was the comment that he made. And I have found that typifies high-performing people. It can't be disputed that Michael Jordan was certainly high-performing. And you're thinking nobody that coached him had his ability. Nobody.
No, he's the GOAT. He's the greatest.
Yeah, nobody had his ability, but that didn't mean that these weren't people who couldn't offer something that they were observing. It didn't have anything to do with their ability. Because we've constantly heard, those who can't teach. Well, I understand where that proverb came from, but not necessarily true. Jordan, I think, was Jordan because of his God-given natural ability, but because of that quote, because he was coachable, he wanted to learn, he listened, he wanted to know what he could do to improve. So I don't know.
He practiced incessantly to get better at it. He wasn't, I'm good enough, so I don't have to do anything.
Right. That's right.
It is to me, it's so much inclusive of the mindset. I agree with you. The high performers that I have had the privilege to lead, they are always eager to learn. They also let you know, and they are flexible to adapt. In other words, as soon as you see something, you can challenge their thought and they don't get defensive, which is what I'm always impressed with. I remember when I had somebody, they were learning something. Now, this is back in my HR days, but they were trying to learn something very complex. And I had been working with them it was a monthly project that came out. It was really going over like our insurance fund and stuff that's just intensive. And it had all these things you had to remember. And they sent it to me, and I could tell that you talk about eager, right? They said, okay, we think we've got it. Can you look at it? And all I sent back was so close, right? So close. Think bigger. And the response was, ooh, a test. I'm on it. Right. So it was
challenge.
eagerness, aggressive, like it wasn't, dang it. I failed again. It wasn't that. It was okay. And they're like, okay. Then they came back and they said, can we come to your office? We think we found it. And so they were, that hungry. I want to get this right, not only for them, but for me. And so that when they brought it back, they were like, okay, this is what we checked. I looked at the notes. I think we got it. And I was like, okay, that was also a fix that I didn't catch, but that's not what I was thinking about, and they're like, okay, we found something you didn't find. And I mean, it was just playful eagerness and hunger. So ultimately, as I was teaching them, they're like, oh, I didn't see, when I told it, because they just couldn't find it. And that wisdom, that eagerness to learn is always what I've experienced with high performers. The question mark in their head of, okay, how do I remember that? How do I add that to my knowledge base? And they're not only, I say eager to please, not like they're so focused on pleasing, but they are eager and hungry to learn and to be great for themselves and for others, so that they do well by the city in our case. Those are the ones I love. Now, let's flip to the opposite side, which you mentioned, the average or low performers. I have never found them to be eager, and I've always found them to be defensive or completely passive. In other words, you teach them something and they're like, okay. They don't take notes. Right. They don't modify behavior. They listen because they know that they're supposed to listen, and they do nothing with it. That's when low performers just don't change. They don't adapt. They don't navigate change well, and nor they seem uneager to even want to change to better themselves, because they think I'm just doing enough. And high performance, frankly, is hard work. It takes effort and energy and time that you have to invest in continually to help yourself become better.
Well, it's a way of life. I grew up in retail, and I grew up running retail companies, and I've long told business people, and it's true in city government too. I think this is all just largely an exercise of making up your mind, especially when it comes to top level leaders. I mean, the high performer city managers, including Grand Prairie, that I have experienced are no different than high performing business leaders, in that what these men and women have done is they've made up their mind. This is how we're going to be. This is who we're going to be. And this is the way we're going to roll. And it's completely congruent with the Michael Jordan quote. We are going to constantly get better. We're going to continually tweak things. And if we see something that needs more than a tweak, we're going to blow it up and do whatever we got to do to get it right. We're going to fix what ails us. And I think it trickles down certainly to the individual who has that attitude. And where I see it go south, culturally meaning the culture of the organization, is when you get somebody in, you hire somebody only to realize, okay, well, they hadn't made up their mind. That's not the mind they've made up. And now we have a misfit, and we can either choose to live with that or deal with that appropriately. But I think for Michael Jordan to know that he's got these skills, at what point did he gain the confidence and know that he could do it? He famously was cut from high school basketball teams. Twice. But at some point in his life, he realized, I've got the capacity to get better. I mean, did he ever foresee himself being who he became? I don't know. Yeah. I sort of doubt it. But at some point, he felt confident enough that he could play at this level, at a collegiate level, And then at some point, he gained confidence to figure out he could play at a pro level, but he had a lot of great coaches along the way.
Yeah.
It wasn't just the coach that coached him in the pros. I mean, his college coach was stellar, and he listened.
You know,
And,
it's so interesting because I don't want our listeners to mistake the high performance and the eagerness to learn that needs to be everybody that they work with. They have to see that trait in everybody they work with, because I've also seen high performers that are high performers in their role that don't want to move up. They do a great job every day. And we've got a gentleman that is our maintenance worker that does all of our groundskeeping outside. He doesn't want to be a supervisor. He doesn't want to move up. He works independently and is amazing and friendly. And that is his passion, is keeping our grounds beautiful every single day.
yeah, but it's not position and power. I
No,
guarantee
that's
if we
correct.
had him on the show, I guarantee he's trying to figure out better ways, more effective ways, and how to do his present job that he loves, how to do it better, which is high
Right.
performance.
And he has pride doing it. And
Yeah.
so, and he's humble, you know. So I just want our listeners to understand a high performing team doesn't mean everybody's looking to move up. Like you said, it's not title, it's being the best you can be, and the willingness to learn and adapt and be flexible as challenges are in front of you.
Well, I'll put it in a phrase because I hear the phrase, that's good enough. Says no high performer ever.
No, no.
Yeah, that's good enough. This is good enough. And I'm not talking about being caught in perfectionism and, okay, as a result, as they say in the business world, okay, so we can't ship it because it ain't ready yet. Well, come on, at some point we got to ship. At some point we've got to produce the thing. At some point we've got to make the sale. At some point we have to complete the thing. So it's not that, but it's just this nonchalant attitude of, yeah, that's okay. So I spend time, with the grandkids, and we have conversations about making your bed and keeping your room clean and stuff. And you go in, it just looks like a closed bomb went off, and the bed, clearly nobody's even touched the bed. And you're like, what do y'all see? And they're like, well, it looks fine to us. Okay, well, that ain't high performance.
In the room cleaning.
Yeah, I mean, just that. But it's interesting to me how things can start, so early. And I get that some people are more fanatical about certain things, but all of the personality traits that humans can portray and have, I've seen most all of them in high performers. I've seen that obsessive person. I've seen that person who has to battle perfectionism. I've seen that person who's great at shooting from the hip. They might not be as strategic as some of us, but they're still high performers because they still listen. And I don't know how you can be coachable and not listen. They still were aggressive, which is an interesting phrase that Jordan used, that he was a sponge and he was aggressive to learn. That's rare.
Yes.
That's rare among high performers, being aggressive to learn. I can encapsulate it. I think I've said this before, and if I haven't, I should have. The times that I hear in sessions that I have with clients, well, now, and they're talking about a boss, we've got to make sure it's his idea. We really need to make sure it's her idea. I mean, I hear this constantly professionally. Well, this is not coachable. This is not coachable. This is a person who basically, I'm being told, they really don't listen. And that's problematic. Now, thankfully, I don't hear it. I heard it way more in business circles because I just tend to be a guy that I don't even get engaged by people, by leaders that aren't high performers. It's just not the nature of the beast. So there's no statistical validity to my evidence. But it's interesting, that whole listening thing. I do occasionally have conversations with people where they will ask me, and I'll help them walk through something. And if you've listened to us for any time at all, you already know that Lisa nor I are big on shoulding people. Well, you should do this and you shouldn't do this. We try to put some tips out there, but we're really just trying to provoke you to think and figure this out for yourself with some principles and guidelines and hopefully some high level stuff and enough details and stories to help you relate. But the times that people will say, well, I'm thinking about doing this, and I'll push back just to get them to think and say, well, you could do that, but you could also do this, or you could do that. And once in a while, I'll encounter somebody that their mind's already made up. You don't know it necessarily until after the fact. And I'll end by saying, what are you going to do? Yeah, well, I think the idea that I had was, which is fine. I'm not offended by it at all. But it's like, okay, so we just had a 50-minute conversation for what?
Yeah.
I'm not trying to change your mind, but if there's three different strategies that you could take, and we've kind of vetted all three, and we've pointed out that my metaphor is landmines, because my first role as a coach is do no harm. The last thing I want is to put a client in harm's way. I don't want to see people take actions that could hurt them and hurt their career. And you're like, okay, well, yeah, you could do that. Here's a problem I see. Oh, well, I hadn't thought about that. Here's a landmine that I see. Oh, well, I hadn't thought about that. And then you take two other approaches and you're like, are there any landmines on the second approach? And they'll say, no. I mean, not that I can think of. You? And I'll go, no, me neither. Okay, this third approach, completely different approach. You see any landmines? No. Do you? No. Yeah, but I'm going to do that first one anyway. It's like,
Yeah. Yep.
not
Well,
coachable, not listening.
It's interesting because I think that is such a short phrase that he said, but there's so many important words in there. You hit on them. Coachable. High performers, always coachable. Second, aggressive to learn. That phrase, aggressive to learn, it's said for a reason. It's not just, I'm just going to kind of wing it. I'm just going to kind of, when I feel like it. Aggressive means it's purposeful almost. You've got a purpose in wanting to learn. And sponge. Every high performer that I've encountered soaks up. I mean, they are intensely listening when you're providing feedback. And you can see their mind going, okay, that's a good point. I didn't think of that. You can see them just soaking it in and going, and then they apply it. That's how you know they were listening. And I remember when you made a point of being good enough. That is funny because you taught hockey. Don, my husband, coached baseball from 9 to high school for this select group of boys. The same pretty much group stayed together. And he taught our kids. And I remember him over and over and over talking to those kids, whether it was baseball team or our own. I mean, he would sit in there and they are intensely listening. You're talking about a group of high performers. These are just kids from the neighborhood.
Yeah.
A rec team that was high performing as a team. And he said, do not be just good enough. Do not just be good enough. If you need to work on something, let's work on it. And I mean, work on it. And I remember him as many times as he was tired working a 12-hour day and going out in the backyard, he'd get home and Haley was like, Dad, I need to practice my swings off. And I remember him going, get your stuff. And they would come in huffing and puffing out the back door, but they would work on it for an hour and a half. Didn't matter how mad they got, right?
Right.
Because he's dad. He's trying to correct. He's trying to
right.
practice. They're frustrated because they can't get it. But they did it every day, over and over. And they had the wisdom to come to him, no matter how mad they got the day before. Haley's like, you have it in you to do a couple more. I feel like it's getting better. I need to work on my bunt now, and he'd go out back. He's like, just going to eat dinner and they would go till dark. And he did the same thing with the baseball team. And it was always just don't be good enough. Never settle for good enough, and I think that is so important for us as leaders too, we don't want to settle, the team is good enough. For high performing leadership, we also want to be focused on our team. We want to be focused on ourselves, and therefore always moving towards high performance and high performing teams.
It's unfair for us to expect our people to grow and improve if we're not willing to as leaders.
Right.
It's hypocritical, and there's no point. I probably need to modify my quote. Everything is hard until it's easy, and add to that probably embrace the hard. I think as people try to migrate toward, I want it to be easy, so I'm willing to put in the work until it gets easy. But the reason Jordan is Jordan, and the reason that high performers are high performers, is because they're never living in the land of easy.
Yeah.
They can perform things that what once weren't routine now become routine. But as I'm thinking about this, every high performer that I've known, and I'll include you and me in that, and many of the people that I intimately know there in Grand Prairie, we're still always looking to embrace that thing that isn't yet easy, that thing that we haven't mastered, that thing that we still want to master, because there's still, I can tell you as an old guy, there's endless things that I have not mastered that I need to put in the work to master, things that are hard. And so, yeah, I probably need to modify that quote.
Well, and it's the only other thing I would add for myself and for our audience, if you don't already have one, find somebody, and Randy will be humble, but I'd say find a Randy. Randy and my husband, those are the two people that give me wisdom and are bold enough to say, is that the best way? Have you thought about, have you considered, hey, you need to, my husband, you need to take a breath when you're talking and listen to what they're saying back. They challenge my thinking. So find you a Randy. I'd say find you a Don, but he's mine. But find somebody like him that gives wisdom and challenges your thoughts and doesn't just agree with you on everything. That's part one. Second part, it is important. I find it, Randy and I were just talking about this before the show started. For a high-performing team and a high-performing leader, you need to make sure it is not only going to be hard, but you're going to have people continuously that are not performing at a high level. It doesn't matter if it's your existing team, it turns over. You will be challenged by people that are not high performers in your work group, in your circle. Don't let them bring you down. Don't let them influence your behavior, because there's always somebody. There's always somebody that's not going to be performing, not exceeding, not willing to change. It'll be forever something you're dealing with, and you still rise above that and help your team rise above that negativity or inability to change and adapt. It doesn't matter if it's this job, the next role, a different company. You will always face that. So don't let them bring you down, and then be willing always to change yourself and adapt.
Thanks for watching and listening to Grow Great, a city government leadership podcast. For Lisa Norris, I'm Randy Cantrell. Be well, do good, grow great. The website is growgreat.com.